about, well, as usual with me, with about spiritual growth and freedom, but specifically about transcending the physical. And sort of, I'm going to create an exercise in consciousness that's going to help us do just that, transcending the physical. And an interesting thing, when I started thinking about, when I was preparing for this teaching, um, I was thinking about transcendence, and transcendence means to go beyond the range or limits of whatever it is we're talking about. In this case, we're talking about physical or physical consciousness. And I was thinking about what metaphysical means, and metaphysics. And it is a branch of philosophy that examines the fundamental nature of reality, including the relationship between mind and matter, between substance and attribute, and between potentiality and actuality. And that's actually kind of what I'm going to be doing today. And I'm going to set in motion something today that, and give an exercise that we can practice. The next time I'm teaching is March 14th. And so I'm going to give an exercise to do between now and March 14th. And I'm going to begin my teaching on March 14th by asking for a couple of volunteers to talk about their experience with this exercise and the intention that we're going to set. Okay? So it should be fun and should be interesting. Okay, so I'm going to talk first about I guess this began with the book of Romans. I read, be ye not conformed to this world, but transformed by the renewing of your mind, which is was written by Paul in the book of Romans. And I started thinking about how my mind was transformed. And there's one really profound event in my life, and it's what I call a direct spiritual experience. Okay? And that's actually what we're going to be attempting to create using this exercise, is a direct spiritual experience. And what I mean by direct is that we won't be using angels or God or Jesus or Buddha or anybody else, no intermediaries. We are going to be opening ourselves and unifying, being in communion with the creative consciousness of the universe, so God. That's what we're going to be setting our intention to do and then doing. I really have a lot of faith in the power of intention. Jesus said, "Seek and ye shall find, knock and the doors shall be opened," etc. That's the power of intention. We're going to point our mind into becoming unified with the consciousness of God. And in communion. It's interesting because actually I was thinking about, I was raised a Catholic, and we do this thing called communion every Sunday, where we go up to the little railing, and the priest puts this piece of unleavened bread in your mouth, and you drink a little wine, and that's called communion. And I did that for I don't know how long, not knowing anything about what communion actually was. And that's what I'm talking about today, is the communion with God, which means to join in unity, to merge in consciousness, to become one with. In this case, we're becoming one with the one. And in this process, we're gonna discard intermediaries. Not that I'm degrading that path. I mean, angels, saints, symbolic entities are really, really valuable in our growth and can be really helpful. I'm not diminishing that. It's just not what we're doing during this exercise. When we do this, so first of all, let me talk a little bit about setting the intention, okay? Because the intention we're setting is an intention to open up and join and welcome in the consciousness of God. And at the same time, expanding into the consciousness of, expanding human consciousness, our Jeffness, or our whatever, our person, personal consciousness into the consciousness of the one. So that's the intention. That's what I mean by communion, is to actually have an experience, a direct spiritual experience. And by the way, it's a profound experience that changes your experience of physical life. Because in this process, we discover our true nature, who and what we truly are as spiritual beings rather than as physical beings. You know, physical beings is something that we're temporarily taking part in. Being a spiritual being is what we are. And so I want to talk a little bit about transcending the physical, because this is something that actually I was confused about. Because transcending means to go beyond the limits, to go beyond the range. In this case, we're talking about physical consciousness. But by transcending the physical, I do not mean ignoring the physical. The human consciousness is born with our physical existence, and it starts expanding immediately and continues to expand the entire time we're alive in physical form. You know, I've said a million times, and of course I'll probably say a million more. My experience of spiritual growth is growing from a self-centered, self-conscious, limited, small, selfish mentality to a more expansive, inclusive, unified consciousness. And that's exactly what the purpose of this exercise is. So to transcend does not mean to disregard, and it does not mean to abandon or to ignore. To transcend, you are still part of physical consciousness. You're simply expanding your human consciousness beyond the limits of the physical. And actually, after we have one of these really profound, what I'm calling direct spiritual experiences, it actually changes our experience of physical life. And the reason it changes our experience of physical life is because a lot of the things that we're afraid of because of the limits of human consciousness, or the human limits of human beings. You know, we fear rejection. We fear that we're inadequate. You know, if you experience that you are a perfectly created, spiritual being, and you actually recognize that, you're never going to feel inadequate again. And you're not going to feel inferior to other people. You may still have some guilt and shame that you have to go back and make amends and stuff to get free of, but you're going to recognize that all those feelings of not enough or inadequacy, those will disappear. Also, a lot of our fear of rejection disappears because we are actually one with the other. Okay, and I'm talking about every other, every other human being, every other spiritual being in the universe, and one with the actual creator of the universe. And that's a pretty mind-shifting thing. There's kind of a self that transcends the physical. And some people like to call this the higher and lower minds. Okay? Although unity, real communion with the one, actually transcends the concept of mind. There's no mind, there's no self, there's no anything other than all. Well, there's everything, I guess. So this stuff can be confusing, as you can probably tell. When you try to start putting stuff like this into words, we are not inadequate, but the words are inadequate to describe. So a lot of the things we do out of fear, like projecting into the future and being worried, someone once pointed out that I was a worrier, that I would actually think of bad things happening in the future, and then I would become fearful. Another friend of mine actually explained to me that if you create these situations in your mind that don't really exist, and then you have emotional reactions to them, that's actually called delusional. But that actually, I often worry about things that haven't actually happened. But also things like remorse, self-pity, a lot of these things disappear with these this connection, because when we come back from a direct spiritual experience, we have this connection, this consciousness of this presence within us that is the one, the all in all. And also what comes with this is a kind of an openness to new ideas. We're no longer scared to feel inadequate, so we no longer have to, we no longer vehemently defend our current position. We have an openness to new things and new ideas, new activities. Mainly because we see that the risks involved are not what we thought they were. So it gives us a great degree of freedom. And of course, everybody has heard me say that freedom is a manifestation of the highest levels of consciousness. Dependency is a manifestation of the lowest levels of consciousness. Okay, so I'm going to talk, I'm almost halfway through already. This goes really fast. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about setting the intention in this exercise that I want people to do. And by the way, it's a very, very simple exercise. And there's some conditions I'm going to set that, if you really want to be successful at this, are pretty much mandatory. So the letting go and opening up, a lot of times we're letting go of everything from our symbology to our egos. One rule for this exercise is no mind-altering drugs, especially marijuana, alcohol, or other hallucinogens. Okay. The reason I say that is because we are not trying to create a simulation. Okay, and that's a lot of times what these drugs will do. Okay, we intend to induce a true experience of the unity with the one, with the creative consciousness of the universe. So no mind-altering drugs. Okay. If you have trouble stopping smoking the marijuana or drinking the alcohol or whatever, eating the mushrooms or whatever it is you're doing, then give me a call, because I work in the field of addiction. Anyway, sorry about that. So we're looking for a direct spiritual experience. So I'm going to sort of give you this very, very simple exercise. One thing is that it does not need to be timed. If you're a person who's inclined to timing things like this, do not do less than 10 minutes. And longer is better. The reason I say that is because knowing your consciousness, knowing that there is a timer set that's going to go off sometime in the future, ties you to the physical and consciousness. So if you can do this without timing, that's much better. But if you have to time it, no less than 10 minutes, and more is better, because you're not going to be anticipating as much. All right. So the biggest thing, and kind of the most important thing, because most people in this metaphysical church have meditated before, and basically this is an exercise in consciousness that we're doing, and it's very similar to meditation. I think maybe the difference here is that we are actually intentionally going to create unity with God. We're actually going to create communion. So probably the most important step here, and I guess you could call this a mantra if you wanted to, but I don't want you to repeat it over and over again. This is an intention, not a mantra. I want you to create an intention to join in unity with God. Okay. And there's a bunch of different ways to do this. I am not going to limit you in the ways that you can do this. You can use it if you want to create a prayer to set that intention. That's a very good way to do it. Prayer is a very good tool for directing our minds to a specific thing. As a matter of fact, I always thought, I was trying to get God to give me stuff or give someone else stuff. That's really not a very effective way to pray. My prayer definitely improved when I accepted that God did not need my advice. But prayer is a very good tool for directing my mind to where I want to go, where I want it to go. So in creating an intention to be in unity with God, prayer setting that intention is a very good tool. Okay? I'm not going to give you a prayer. I want this to be a creative endeavor for each one of us. Okay. The next step is to, and this goes back to that transcending the physical is not ignoring the physical, is sort of check in with your physical self. Are you in distress? Are you comfortable? Are you safe? You know, so find a safe, comfortable place to sit or lie down, whatever you wish to do, and do that. Make yourself comfortable. Okay, and then we are going to practice offering ourselves, offering our consciousness, offering and opening our consciousness in unity to the one source of all consciousness. Okay? And it's just as simple as that. Okay, and once again, talking about spiritual growth is always expansion into a more inclusive, unified consciousness. That's what this is. We are taking our human consciousness and we are expanding it into God consciousness. And it's going to be really strange for a lot of us that haven't done this kind of thing before, because God's consciousness is an undifferentiated, undivided, timeless consciousness. And although it's a very extraordinary experience, mind-altering experience, to allow it can be very difficult sometimes because we're moving out of our norms. There's an old saying that growth always happens outside of our comfort zones, and I have not found an exception to that yet in my 66 years of life. So the next step is simply to allow the union. Okay, so we create the intention, we find a safe, comfortable place to be, then we offer and open our consciousness to the unity, to the one source of all consciousness. And then we allow the union. Okay? And that is the entire process. Okay, so what I'm requesting for you all to do is to practice this once a day, whatever time is best for you. Some people feel like they're more quiet in the morning, so it's good to do something like this in the morning. Some people wake up and their minds are already going, so they need time to calm down. So sometimes in the evening is the most quiet time for some people. I would do it in a time where you can create the space where you're not going to be interrupted. Because like I said, the purpose of this is to transcend the physical. And if there's things in your physical environment that are going to hold your consciousness there, then this is probably going to be much more difficult. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about because I do have a couple minutes left here. So that is the exercise, and our intention is to become in communion with God. And by the way, this has replaced a lot of my prayer in my life. Simply communing with God rather than praying to God has kind of become the dominant connection. And there are other things, benefits, I would say, that happen from this. Like I said, it changes our perspective on a lot of things. I won't say tolerance. My interest in conflict is diminishing. I used to be one of those people that would just argue you into the ground. You could prove me wrong 1,000 different ways, and I would still argue with you. And that's just a twist of my character, I guess. But that has really pretty much disappeared from my life, but my interest in being in conflict with other people about these little transient issues has really diminished. And as Betty read earlier, is that one of my primary movers in my life is to eliminate as much unnecessary human suffering as possible. And the vast majority of our suffering in our lives does not come from the things that happen in our lives. It comes from what we think and what we project, and being lost in remorse and shame and guilt. And this type of experience that we're creating here is a now experience. It can only happen in the moment, because that's the only place reality is. When we move out of the moment into our past or into the future, our suffering begins. So this is one more tool in our toolbox to keep us in the moment, fill us with incredible energy, incredible creative energy, and a love of living. I was talking about an old friend of mine with somebody yesterday, and he became my friend because I was attracted to him just because he loved living. I mean, this guy just loved living. He was full of joy. And he eventually grew old. He was almost 90 when he died. But what an impact this guy had in my life, because I want to love living. And that's the kind of things these experiences can give us. It's this great joy, even in apparent calamity. Because the calamities are just in the physical. If we are living in a consciousness that is beyond the physical, we can see that calamity in a different perspective that minimizes it rather than makes it bigger than it is. A friend of mine once said that our minds are like microscopes. If we look at an amoeba in a microscope, it looks as big as a house. And that's kind of what we do to our problems. We focus on our problems till they're so big they overwhelm us. These kind of spiritual experiences can put the events of our life into a context that is more realistic, and we're able to deal with them much more effectively because we're not paralyzed by fear. And we're able to love and connect with each other, and connect with people who are different than us, connect with people that have different points of view and different life experiences and all that kind of stuff, because, like I said, we transcend our physical circumstance. And this gets reflected in so many aspects of our lives that it's just amazing, breathtaking. Okay, so I'm going to stop with a statement from an old friend of mine, and Pam will recognize this one. See, my goal here is to live my life calm and collected and divinely directed. Thank you very much.